This program contains reenactments of real people and real events. This program is intended for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
Okay.
A Missouri man is shot in the head on a deserted country road. Is it murder? The only clue, a shredded bullet. Identifying the gun that fired it will be nearly impossible. In Florida, a man is beaten to death in his home. Police uncover fingerprints and rumors of an exotic weapon.
That's what it looks like.
For law enforcement, the toughest opponent is often an assassin with no clear ties to the victim. Using science as their most powerful weapon, investigators must find these hired killers and make them pay the true price of murder. In this episode, some of the names have been changed. Hillsboro, Missouri is a small town located a few miles west of the Mississippi River. On November 21st, 2000, on a stretch of commercial property owned by a chemical manufacturing plant just outside Hillsboro, a security guard spotted a vehicle sitting in a field. He discovered a man in the driver's seat, slumped over the steering wheel. The man was unresponsive. He was bleeding from a wound in the back of his head. The security guard called 911.
Jefferson County 911, what is your emergency? A man in a field?
A dispatcher alerted units from the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department.
7214, 6710.
Within minutes, paramedics and deputies were on the scene. But for the man who lay motionless in the driver's seat, it was too late. Paramedics pronounced him dead at the scene. Detective William McDaniel took charge of the case.
When I pulled up, there was a car partially off a gravel roadway, had a white male slumped at the wheel. The rear passenger side window was shattered. It looked like from a bullet.
Okay, I guess what we'll do then.
The evidence suggested to Detective Michael Gray the car was moving when the man was shot.
Do it here.
When the vehicle was found, it was in gear. His foot was still on the brake pedal. We initially were looking at the possibility of it being hunting related simply because of the time of year. The area in question is known for a lot of hunting.
The driver was removed from the vehicle and identified by his license. His name was Larry Holman, a 44-year-old from nearby Hillsboro. The victim's wife was contacted. Detective McDaniel knew the victim from around town. He was a church-going family man, not a man prone to have many enemies.
Open up the right door.
He was also an avid hunter.
Yeah, I pulled from down the road.
The security guard revealed that the subject was in the field area scouting for deer for possible hunting locations. It's the last day of deer season, and the car is in a field where the deer cross, so there's a chance that somebody may have thought it was a deer moving across the field.
Detectives turned to forensics to find the source of the deadly shot.
Well, the important thing was to try to determine the direction the projectile came from. Once we got a direction, we'd have a line on where to search for any items of forensic evidence, any shell casings, items left behind. That's why it was important to try to position everything back in its original location. We repositioned the vehicle back on the road. We figured out a trajectory angle based upon the approximate head height of the gentleman. It was a matter of setting up a tripod, taking a trajectory string, and then just extrapolating back into the wooded area.
Holman had been shot from behind, the bullet passing through the window and the car's headrest before killing him.
Okay, that's good.
Police used this information to reconstruct the bullet's path.
Mrs. Holman?
Yes.
Police spoke with the victim's wife, Tammy, to see if she could shed any additional light on the investigation.
I need to speak to you about your husband.
I don't understand.
She said she had last seen him the morning he was killed. The couple had been married nearly 15 years.
Okay.
She described her marriage as happy and could think of no one who wished Larry harm. She wasn't able to provide any additional information.
He was shot down at his place.
An autopsy was performed, though it offered few clues that could point to a perpetrator. According to the coroner's report, Larry Holman died instantly. A high-velocity slug was retrieved from his skull, but it was unidentifiable. The bullet's lead core was gone. Only a mangled copper jacket survived. Investigators hope to recover more pieces of the bullet in the victim's car.
See if we can preserve that.
The projectile, it had fragmented when it penetrated the glass. When we processed the vehicle, we found some fragments from the projectile embedded in the headrest of the driver's seat. So we decided to retrieve that in the attempt to try to determine the caliber of the weapon and maybe the ammunition that was used.
At the Missouri State Highway Patrol Crime Lab, forensics expert Todd Garrison was charged with putting the bullet back together again.
First, it hit a window of an automobile. Secondary impact was the headrest of the automobile. The third impact was the victim's head. Each one of those impacts contributing a little bit more to its damage and distortion. One of the copper fragments out of the headrest had rifling engraving on it that was similar to the rifling engraving that was observed on the bullet out of the victim's head.
He determined that he was looking at pieces of a .243 caliber bullet. At the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department, detectives formed a task force. If this was a hunting accident, it would be nearly impossible to solve.
Guys, watch.
Thousands of hunters passed through the area.
It's basically 30-40 feet out.
Detective Gray laid out what little they did know.
Okay, so you're saying about...
You have an individual who's what we term low risk. The guy's a family man. The guy had no known enemies. Did not live a lifestyle that would be conducive to violence.
Investigators, however, were not yet willing to declare the case an
I think
accident.
I'm going to take the four names I got. The wood line,
Something didn't seem right.
glass, which we are...
Accidental shots usually end up somewhere else on the body. Headshots are usually an aimed shot. When you start thinking about the laws of probability, we have a moving target, small rear window. The thickness of the woods, it did not look like an accident.
I think we need to go out and maybe talk to some residents.
By January, little headway had been made on the case. Then, police got a break from an unlikely source.
Hi, Detective. Okay.
Tammy Holman, the victim's widow, told investigators about a series of unsettling letters she had been receiving.
Yes, I did. It's weird.
After her husband was shot, a man named Carter Davis began writing her love letters.
You know, it's just kind of fishy.
Tammy said she had rebuffed him, but he would not leave her alone. She turned his letters over to police. "I love you and won't let you go," read one. "We're soulmates," read another. The detective's interview with Holman's widow left them with some questions.
Wouldn't say who he was.
No, he wouldn't say who it was.
They knew that a man named Alan Tripp had moved in with her shortly after her husband was killed.
Check on this.
Mrs. Holman started to look suspicious to us. Her actions didn't really correspond with a grieving widow. It began to expand our investigation.
Detectives ran Tammy's name through the system. Her record was clean. But they also knew her name did appear on another significant document. Larry Holman's insurance policy offered a payout of $125,000. He had an additional policy of $2 million if he died in a hunting accident. The beneficiary was his wife. For detectives, what started as a simple accident was now looking like it might be cold-blooded murder.
When diabetes feels like a storm cloud, my life is a little harder with diabetes. Sometimes I miss out on fun activities. Checking my blood sugar at first, I didn't like it, but it was actually not bad.
Now, Rain uses the new contour meter from Bayer, and she chose Royal Purple. At last, a meter she can easily personalize.
I'm Rain, and playing with my friends is my simple win.
The new contour meter from Bayer, now available in 4 vibrant colors.
Drivers who recently switched to Allstate Your Choice Auto Platinum not only saved an average of $374 a year, but they also got accident forgiveness, deductible rewards, and a safe driving bonus check. Nice.
Hey.
Oh, hi. You know, it's pretty quiet.
In November 2000, Missouri deer hunter Larry Holman was found dead in a field. He'd been shot in the head with a .243 caliber bullet fired from a hunting rifle. At first, it appeared as if it was an accident, but police were beginning to have their doubts. They weren't the only ones. In January 2001, the victim's brother, Randy Holman, turned in a .243 Winchester bolt-action rifle. He knew the police were looking for that type of weapon and suspected Larry's death was no accident. Randy feared the killer was someone his brother knew who may have used this gun to murder him.
If you want to have a seat.
At the time of the murder, the gun had been stored at the home of Larry and Tammy Holman.
I ended up getting it from Tammy.
Randy had good reason to suspect his brother was murdered.
You said you had
He told police his brother Larry had been shot at before.
We were at my parents' place.
Days before his death, Larry had gone hunting deep in the Missouri woods.
Randy stated that he and Larry had had a conversation later in the night after hunting. Larry stated that he had a close call. And Randy asked, well, what do you mean by a close call? And he goes, well, I had a bullet whiz by my head. Because there was so much gun activity up in the northern part of Missouri during deer season. And they kind of joked about it.
But now he knew it was no joke and wondered if Larry had been shot with his own gun.
Heavily hunted. I didn't think much about it.
He just wished that that gun would be ruled out so that way he knew the gun had no involvement into his brother's death.
Alan, thanks for coming by.
Yes.
Investigators sent the gun to ballistics and began interviewing suspects. First on their list was Alan Tripp, the widow's new love interest.
You know what we want to talk to you about?
Tripp had grown up with Tammy Holman and came to her side shortly after Larry's death.
Oh, I've known her since grade school. We went to grade school together.
Within the last couple months, Alan Tripp had moved in with Mrs. Holman and actually gave her an engagement ring.
No.
His actions raised some red flags with us. He stated he had no knowledge of the incident, that he had spoke to Mrs. Holman several times about the so-called accident, and she stated that there was nothing there.
Calling her all the time.
Investigators also sought out a local man named Carter Davis.
Yeah, he's right over there clearing that table.
Tammy said Davis had become infatuated with her, showering her with flowers and love letters.
I need to ask you some questions about...
Letters that concerned Tammy Holman.
Oh.
Like Tripp, he insisted he had nothing to do with the crime.
Tammy and I are friends.
At one time, Carter Davis actually put a note on Alan Tripp's car which said, "Did you kill him?"
She's always said from the
and
beginning.
he just believed that Alan Tripp had something to do with his death.
But other than that, she's never said much.
Police had also gotten a very interesting lead. They learned that Tripp and Davis were not the only men close to Tammy Holman.
We received an anonymous phone call. It was a male subject.
The caller suggested they check out the alibi of a third man.
It was a male caller?
The tipster said Charles Miller had a gun similar to the one police were looking for. McDaniel checked Miller's record for any previous arrests. Miller had a record. He had been arrested for check fraud. A few days later, on January 9th, 2001, investigators caught another break.
Okay, thank you. Have a seat.
Nice to meet you.
A woman gave police new information on the case.
Some information I don't know if you can use.
She told Detective McDaniel that she lived near the field where Holman was shot. For several days leading up to the crime, she observed a suspicious-looking man with a gun walking near the crime scene. McDaniel showed the woman a lineup. She identified Charles Miller without hesitation.
Yeah, right there, I'm sure.
Within hours, they had their man in sight.
Miller!
Charles Miller was arrested and brought in for questioning. He admitted he was a friend of the Holmans, but claimed to know nothing of the crime.
He's good.
They had attended Sunday schools together. Miller would come over and do work around the Holman's house. He would bring eggs, he would bring, bacon, and so Tammy would cook breakfast in the morning for him and Larry.
Miller offered to cooperate with investigators.
Mr. Miller gave us permission to do a consent to search on firearms that he had owned. We were only looking for high-powered rifles, and he actually gave us 3 rifles, one being a Browning Bolt A-Action 243.
Deputies also seized boxes of .243 caliber ammunition and cell phone records, which indicated that Miller had called the Holman residence on the day of the crime.
Once the gun was seized from Charlie Miller during the consent to search, it was delivered to the Missouri State Highway Patrol Crime Lab in Jeff City for a ballistic match.
Criminalist Todd Garrison examined Miller's rifle, as well as Larry Holman's gun brought in by his brother Randy.
I test fired both of the rifles in question. From those, I obtained bullets, which I could do microscopic comparison